The full power of the Genius process comes to life in a team context. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the different elements of the app that we use when we're preparing for either a team workshop or a partnering session, and walk you through some of the ways you can use this information and the reports to enhance your team efforts. Let's get an orientation of the team page. In the upper left-hand corner, you'll see the name of the team and the company it's associated with. As you walk across to the far right, you'll see my profile. So I can go into the app and it'll go directly to my profile. I can look at teams. Now, depending on your access privilege, you can see either only your team or the teams that you're working with. Next to the link to the teams are the links to users. Now, I can go back to my profile and find mine, or if you have access to individuals on your team, you can go in and hit the user tab and then look at some of the individual reports. If we walk right below that, you'll see that the Genius portrait is green, which means that the paragraph below in the white that says Genius paragraph, that's what we're looking at. And then the grayed out, the kryptonite, if I hit that, that'll turn red, and then that'll bring up a paragraph that describes the shadow side of the traits. In the next slide, I'll show you two of the links to reports. One is that pie chart. The other is that little printer icon. But as we move down, we see that the aggregate strengths of this team create what we call a servant leader ring or archetype, which means it has blue relating strengths, orange acting strengths, and green thinking strengths. We can also see on this particular team that the thinking strengths are dominant. So that'll be interesting when we go into some of the analysis of this. Below the description of the servant leader is the white paragraph of the Genius traits. These sentences were developed by the team, and if you go right below it, you'll see the 5 strengths. Those 5 strengths represent the top 5 strengths of this group of 7. So the app does a little bit of work behind the scenes to pull all this together to make it very easy for the team to walk into developing a description of what they look like at their best and some of the shadow traits. So as I move to the next slide, what we'll see are some of the drop-down windows. These are screenshots of the upper right, and you can see more clearly the pie chart and the printer. And if I hit the down arrow of the pie chart, it says summary statistics, and then I can pull up a report that gives me a summary analysis of the distribution of strengths on the team, plus a comparison between the percentage of individuals with strengths versus Gallup's database. When I look at the screenshot on the right, I see the drop-down arrow where the printer is, and there are several reports that I can access that we'll walk through during this presentation. The next slide shows us what we see below the top 5 strengths. So we're just walking down the page. Along each row, you'll see first the leadership ring, the leadership style of the individual. You'll see the person's name. You'll see the 5 strengths. You'll also see the number of teams that this person may be on. This is one of the features of the app. It lists what teams you're on. List the organization you're associated with, and an administrator can put you on as many teams as you want with no extra cost. And just to the right of the list of the teams that the individual is on and the organization they're associated with is a dashboard. And the green and red dots lets me know if the person has completed their Genius portrait and their shadow portrait, how far they got through the process. And you'll notice just to the right of the green and red bars, there are 3 little dots. Those dots allow me as an administrator to do a few things. Let me show you. When I hit the dots, they pull down a drop-down window. That drop-down window allows me to print this individual's workshop packet. It makes it very easy to do, so you're not having to print lots of individual reports. It's all collated for you. You can give or remove admin privileges. And admin privileges allow you to manage the team as a whole. And you can see that this particular individual is the team admin. It would take a position called a super admin to be able to add other administrators or remove those. And then finally, especially on project teams, people come and go. So we want to be able to add people easily and remove them easily. This drop-down window gives you the ability to manage people on the team. And if you need to add somebody to the team, all you need to do is go up to the green and hit the plus sign, and it'll have a drop-down window, and it's very easy to search alphabetically and add somebody to the team. So what was the process that this team used to build their Genius Portrait? Well, we have one of the reports. It's called the Trait Worksheet. Each individual had a copy of the trait worksheet, and before we had a discussion to choose the traits for each of the strengths, each individual took the trait worksheet and thought about it and picked their own. Then we went into a process of sharing and comparing, and then dialing in on what they thought the team looked like at its best, and then some of the traits where the team's natural tendencies would get in its way. Now, the magic of it is not what they picked. The magic is the dialogue and the discussion and the understanding and gaining clarity about who we are at our best and when our natural tendencies can get in our way. These paragraphs become important benchmarks. And in a lot of my project teams, they practice something called a plus delta. In other words, what was good about the meeting, what could be improved. And now they have a standard to compare it to and a way to continue to improve, play to their strengths, be more aware of the gaps, and also be aware of when their strengths can get in their way. Another use is an exercise where we talk about what's working and what's not working. We have this plumb line to compare to and continually work to improve by reinforcing it and reflecting on it. Once the team completes their Genius Portrait and selects the shadow traits, the app generates a report called a team summary. And this is what it looks like. The team summary is a summary of the leadership archetype of the team. This particular one is a servant leader, of the Genius Portrait, of the kryptonite or the shadow traits, and a brief summary of the top 5 strengths of each team. Now, this becomes a very useful report to keep with you when you do the reinforcing, share stories of what we look like at our best, reflect on opportunities where we can improve. You've always got this benchmark to come back to that provides a standard for you to continue to work towards. So let's take a look at this team's Genius Portrait and their shadow traits. So what you see here is that at their best, what they said is the best ideas will stand up to intense scrutiny. We can ramp up quickly on a topic or a project and pivot when needed. Our team speaks candidly to those in our circle of trust. It's easier to eliminate errors on the front end than to fix them on the back end. We rise to the challenge when there's a deadline. Obstacles fire up our determination and make us stronger. So now this is a declaration. This can be a branding statement. This is a summary of what this team looks like at its best that is shared with the entire project team. And each team shares the unique attributes that help them succeed. These different paragraphs provide the team an understanding of what makes one team unique in terms of how they go about doing their work. It also reveals where we can complement each other and where we might collide. Now, when we walk down to the kryptonite or the shadow traits, let's read this aloud. And this gives us another window into some of the realities of every individual and every team. We all have a shadow nature. We all have tendencies where our strengths can get in our way. And it's good to put it out there and to know it ahead of time. So let's read the paragraph. We have a hard time supporting rapid decision making that we have not yet explored fully. Other teams tell us to slow down. We have a small circle of trust that others can feel excluded or not empowered. Our messaging can come across as non-inclusive. We sometimes need to turn off the achiever so we don't wear others down. In developing this paragraph, the team had a deeper conversation on examples and tendencies and how they might recognize it and manage it. And the one theme that kept coming up in the conversations is that they tend to make decisions and move forward and not give everybody an opportunity to understand the why behind the decision, to ask questions, or to challenge those decisions. So the two outcomes of the conversation was to first share this paragraph with the team, ask for feedback and their experience of this, and set up what we call rules of engagement so that others could let them know when this tendency may be getting in the way. One of the most valuable features of the app are the reports and the analytics that we do with the reports. And I'm going to walk you through a few examples. This is the summary statistics. And what you see are the top ranked strengths on this particular team. And it lists the number of people that have that, the percentage on the team, and then how that compares with Gallup's database in terms of percentage. And so that gives us a lot of information. And in the app, this is dynamic. You can see the up-down arrows at the very top row. So I can sort and look at the lowest number or the highest number of each of those. In this analysis of the team, you can see that I've looked at a couple of traits. The red curved line, for example, those are two strengths that amplify each other. So achiever and responsibility both focus on getting things done through different drivers or energy, but they amp each other up. We call this the overachiever combination. Now you can see that these are the top two strengths of the team. So this gives you a little bit of insight into what this team is all about. They're overachievers. And if you look at the percentage on the team versus the database, when there is a broad higher spread between the percentage on the team versus the database, that's also an indication that it's even more amplified than just the number 1 and 2. You can see also that I've made a connection between consistency and discipline. Those are two strengths that bring order to chaos. Not only is this a goal-oriented team, but it's also a very disciplined team as well. So that's a neat thing to know about it. One of the things that's very useful is to summarize these in a few words. For example, this is an all work and no play team. This is a very disciplined team. They don't take lots of risks because of that consistency and discipline. So I like to compare it as hitting singles and doubles and playing good defense. It's a pragmatic team. It's not a visionary team. It's not an idealistic team. And one of the challenges of this collection of strengths at the top is getting everybody on the same page, or alignment. Walking through these reports with project teams in a virtual setting is perhaps the most valuable aspect to the team leaders. Just understanding the dynamics and the nature of the team, understanding what they naturally do well, understanding the blind spots, understanding where there's some collision. So we'll continue to walk through these reports. And before every partnering session or workshop, we'll schedule 60 to 90 minutes with the team leaders to walk through this. So let's take a look at one other team just to show you how much variety there is in leadership teams or teams in general in terms of the top 5 strengths. So here you see strategic. 4 people out of 9 have the strength, or 44%, but you'll see that it's double the database. So it's a strong marker. Now, when you have strategic and communication next to each other, so think of strategic, very quick, gut level, judgment call, begin with the end in mind. So it's very precise and very quick. And you add that to communication, which is articulate. That combination can look intense. In fact, it can look very much like command. We add to this the strategic achiever dynamic, both looking at the outcome or the end game, focused on the goal, fast moving, fast forward. And now we're beginning to get a picture of this particular team. Quick decisions that come across very clear, maybe even intense, with a fast drive to move forward. So this is a team that's likely taking on some very large tasks, having to make decisions in real time. In this particular report, you can see that I've made a clear distinction between the number of people on the team versus the database and where there's a larger difference. Now, when we summarize this team, you can see that I've written fast forward, real-time decisions, think aloud. So that's some of the dynamic. Now, I won't take time to go into further unpacking it, looking at some of the blind spots, some of the areas of collisions, which would take us deeper down into the report. The purpose of going through these two summary reports is, one, to show you a little bit of the process of how we break it down and analyze it, but two, just how different teams are. I'm oftentimes asked, what's the best configuration for a project team or a leadership team? And the answer is, it could be any combination. The key is knowing your strengths, playing to your strengths, understanding the gaps, and managing the tendencies that you have for your strengths to take over and to work against you. Now we're going to look at a report that shows the leadership styles and the differences in those leadership styles. And we use a ring to show these tendencies. So we see on the top row are the servant leader rings. And you can see the variety of those that are dominant green versus those that are dominant blue and those that are dominant orange. The common denominator is that they lead by example. They roll up their sleeves, work collegially with people. They're reliable and they're thoughtful. If someone has a dominant green zone, then their energy goes a lot to making the plans right. If they have a dominant blue zone, then the energy goes to making the team dynamic work well. If it has a dominant orange zone, then that usually means their energy is about getting things done. So that's why we like this particular configuration, because we can see some of the layers beneath the leadership style. And just as a note, the servant leader is the most common style. It's about 28%. And that's because the three zones of thinking, relating, and acting are the zones that have the most strengths in them. When we move down to the next level, we see a leadership style with all four zones. We see the motivating zone red, we see the acting zone that's orange, we see the thinking zone that's green, and we see the relating zone that's blue. These are called connectors. They naturally pick up on all the elements of what makes a team work well. They naturally elevate team performance, and this comprises about 22%. The other thing that stands out to you is the dominant green zones overall, and there's a lot less motivating strengths on the team. So when we combine this picture with the previous reports, this gives us a granular look at this leadership team at its best and gives us some clear strategy on how to optimize all that green, but also increase the motivating side, which would be a blind spot for this team in general. My favorite report is the team profile. This is where I get to break down the individuals and the combinations of their strengths, very similar to what you saw in the team summary, but this is on an individual basis. And this is my code language. I'll give you a little bit of overview on what the symbols mean. The curve symbols mean that those two strengths amplify each other. The black boxes mean that that strength by itself is an amplifier. It's like a wild card. It affects all of the strengths. And you can see a couple of the profiles where I've drawn a green line that's like a square. Those strengths modify each other. In other words, they give the person a little more breadth. Instead of amplifying and focusing it, they broaden it out because those strengths operate on different poles. So if we look at the first two profiles as an example, one of the things we see is that Angie's got three strengths that are goal-oriented. They are achiever, responsibility, and competition. We see competition is amped up. It's not only the overachiever, it's the super overachiever combination. And this combination means that this person gets things done. Very reliable, very driven, and will stay focused until it's completed. Now, every combination has a shadow side. So Angie has not only created a genius portrait of what she looks like at her best, but she's also built out a paragraph of her shadow traits and how these strengths, overused or being unaware of how they're impacting others, can get in her way. When we move to the next one of the things that we notice immediately, 4 blue strengths and 1 orange. Now the blue strengths fit into a zone called relating, and we like to refer to zones as either a language or an energy field. So the natural fluency that Angie has is she picks up on nonverbal cues that make relationships work. And in another video, we'll go through the zones and what they mean. She reads these nonverbal cues like you and I hear someone's language and understand language. We also see the combination of bringing order to chaos, the discipline and consistency. And interestingly, she has a strength on the opposite pole, adaptability. That gives her the ability to go with the flow, to handle curveballs. So it's a very interesting mix. And when we get a chance to understand Angie a little deeper, go into her genius paragraph and her kryptonite, the team begins to realize, wow, there is a magical combination here that only she has. And so bringing clarity to her magic or her genius and how to optimize it, helping define not only her functional role, but the team role based on her unique strengths. This whole analysis and this combination is extremely powerful to go through. In these next slides, I'm going to show you what some of the material looks like and how we use it in live workshops and in meetings. And in this particular session, this was a project kickoff. So everybody's material, that workshop material that we told you that all you have to do is click the button and it prints out. You can see the name tent, you can see the badge. We use colored folders and colored lanyards that give an indication to someone's dominant zone. All of this is part of helping understand and pick up intuitively on the unique things that people bring to the team. You can already see just by the folders that the dominant traits of this particular team are the thinking zone, the green, then secondly, the relating zone, the blue, then the acting zone, the orange, and then the motivating zone. So all of this information is already communicated just by walking in and seeing an overview of the workshop packets. One of the reports available are the team badges. And so here's a printout of team badges. You simply cut them out, fold them, and laminate them, and that's all you need in order to make the team badges. Here's a sample of a project team in a big room that showcases all of the team badges. And there's some other reports that they've used and created posters just to let everybody see visually the makeup of the team and some of the traits of the individuals. Now in the workshop, people wear the badges. You can see the name tents. It makes it very easy for people to make these connections because as we're working through some of the project exercises, like reviewing the risk register that you can see here, we're also making connections on the way people are responding and the kind of style that they bring to their analysis, to their communication style. All of this is coming together as we experience it live. And so those name tents are also another report. You can see here, all you've got to do is print it on cardstock and then fold it and you're ready to go. Once the workshop is over, the real power comes from how you build it in to your daily rhythm. This is a big room, and one of the things that teams will do is when a new person comes on board, they'll introduce themselves through the Genius paragraph. They might highlight a success and then tie it to one of those traits that the person has. Or they can recognize a contribution and then look at the trait and ask the person to talk about what trait really engaged them in getting this job done, going the extra mile, looking at the details, working collaboratively with somebody. They're all tied to our traits. And so the magic that we've created are simple ways to weave it in to the everyday meetings we have, to the conversations, visual reinforcement. And I like to use an example that one of my companies uses around safety. They have a zero harm policy. So at the beginning of every meeting, they will highlight a safety feature that we should consider. For example, if we need to exit, the exits are there. We'll meet at the parking lot at this area. And then after giving the instructions, they'll share why it was important to do that and a story of why it's needed. That is the same process that we're using with the Genius process. It's called marginal gains. Some of you know the process is Kaizen, consistent incremental improvement. And the way that is done is an icebreaker at the beginning of the meeting, and we've got icebreakers prepared for you, and reflection at the end of the meeting. That might be the plus delta, or it might be taking one of the areas where it didn't go well and taking a deeper dive. It's the simplicity of the paragraphs and the simplicity of the process of reinforcing and reflecting that make it all work. So this brings us to the context where this is most valuable, and that is the team meetings. And that is hearing people's stories, recognizing them, asking questions like, what was your go-to strength last week? Where were you most engaged? What would you like to work on this week? Again, we've got all those questions prompted for you. So we've made it easy for managers to do this. We've actually tested it with 8th graders, and they do quite well. And with a little bit of prompting, you don't have to be an expert on strengths. You just have to follow the system, and it's all about curiosity and the process we've given you. Anybody can build in this reinforcement and reflection just by being curious and with a few tools. So now we're back to the beginning. So go into the app, try the features. We also have some great support tools for you. On most Thursdays from 11 to noon Central Time, we have a free session for anybody who is an internal facilitator, professional facilitator, or coach. And then Tuesdays, we have an onboarding session for people who are new. So once you're in the system, this support is free. And you don't have to go through the heavy lifting of going through and getting people up to speed on this. We'll help you do that. We also have full online training like this video on every single element and all the tips and tricks on using the Genius process. So I hope you can see why I'm excited about the Genius process and the tool. It's making our jobs so much easier and giving you all the control and the ability to scale it through your whole team. So one of the great outcomes that we're seeing is that it's not just the leadership team and the management team getting trained, it's the whole project team all the way to the front line. It's that easy to use. If you have any questions at all or interest in walking through or even going through a demonstration with one of your teams, please reach out. We're here to help you. Have a great day.